Captain Rogers. Here are 4 new trainees assigned to your flight. Lieutenant Hopkins, O'Shea, Visconti, and Bollum.
Captain.
O'Shea.
How did it? Visconti.
Visconti. Bollum.
Yes, sir. Sure is a big ship. Pretty hot to handle, sir?
Oh, I wouldn't say so. She's a mighty sweet airplane.
Comes in like a rocket the way it looks to me.
Oh, she's easier to land than you think.
Aren't there a lot of trick gadgets in this plane?
Well, not much more than you have in training planes. Just a few things you need for high-altitude work. And they put them where they're easy to use. It's got the roomiest cockpit of any fighter plane I've ever seen. Now, it's easy to fly if you just think about what you're doing.
I'll bet there isn't much time to think either.
Well, that's about all there is to do up there, Bollum. This ship flies just like any other airplane. You do about the same things you've always done. Of course, she doesn't fly herself, you know.
Does she feel very heavy in the air, sir? Sir, how fast will she dive? When do you use the turbo?
Well, I think you guys get just a little bit ahead of me. Suppose we go into the pilot's room and we'll begin at the beginning. Well, plant yourselves, boys, while I climb out of this stuff. Well, now, if I'm going to help you fellows understand the P-47, the best thing for me to do is to dish out a lot of facts quickly. We can get together for questions whenever you have them. Now, plenty of our boys are moving up into combat zones ahead of their crews. And they're finding out that it comes in mighty handy to know a lot of details about their airplane. And this is the time to find those things out. And you should keep in mind that this airplane was built to give us our fastest, deadliest high-altitude fighter.
Sir, you say high altitude. What altitude do you mean?
Around 30,000 feet, between 25 and 35,000. Well, now you're going to be sitting up here behind 2,000 horsepower. That's a lot of power, but it's the best life insurance you can have. This airplane cost about $100,000, and they say it takes 30,000 man-hours to build it. I think it deserves some respect from pilots. Now, to handle the P-47 the way the Army expects you to, you should know everything possible about it before you take off the first time. You've got real armament and speed. You're not going to have any trouble with it because it's got good flying characteristics all the way. And it's good on landings. As for weight, well, you'll hear all the boys say you're never even conscious of this plane's weight anytime you've got flying speed. Well, now, let me show you how the P-47 is put together. To begin with, this is the biggest single-engine, single-seater in service. Has a wingspan just short of 41 feet. It's a little over 35 feet long, stands 12 feet 8 inches high, and weighs about 7 tons with a full load. The power plant is 2,000 horsepower with a turbo, and it swings a 4-bladed, 12-foot 2-inch Curtiss prop. Well, let's look at this power plant. This is an 18-cylinder Pratt Whitney radial engine. It's the twin Wasp with 9 cylinders in each bank. Now, one of the first things I notice about this airplane is that it's a smooth flying ship in every way. She'll pick up a lot faster than planes you've been flying. And your turbo will allow the engine to develop its full 2,000 horsepower at high altitude. You want to learn all about this prop. It's a Curtiss electrically controlled constant speed propeller. Now, the reason there are 4 blades is to have enough propeller area to absorb the power of this 2,000 horsepower engine. Right here, on the left side of the cockpit, is a switch panel with a selector switch that gives you positions for automatic or manual control of the propeller. You've got increase RPM and decrease RPM positions. Ordinarily, you'll use the automatic position. But if that should ever fail while you're flying, switch to manual and then increase or decrease RPM. Of course, you want to check your breaker switch first. Well, now here are your 2 self-sealing gas tanks. The main tank, forward of the cockpit, holds 205 gallons. Your auxiliary tank holds 100 gallons. The plane has better flying characteristics when this auxiliary tank is empty. So after takeoff, when you've reached a safe altitude, You switch to auxiliary and use this gas first to put the plane in better trim. There's a fuel level warning light on your instrument panel to tell you when you're down to 40 gallons in your main tank. Underneath the main and auxiliary tanks are electrically operated booster pumps. They're automatically on when fuel from that tank is being used. If the engine-driven pump fails, you turn your emergency and high-altitude rheostat to increase the speed of the booster pump.
Captain, what's the fuel consumption of the engine?
Well, that depends on your power and speed. For absolute minimum cruise, you'll use anywhere from 60 to 120 gallons an hour. However, at full military power, you'll consume as much as 275 to 300 gallons an hour. When the warning light comes on, you've got a maximum of 20 minutes left. Here's your oil tank up here, and down here are your oil coolers with shutters controlled from the cockpit. This is your main air ramp. This is your GE turbo. It's a lot more simple than it looks. The exhaust gases come from the engine, back through these pipes to the turbo. Compressed air leaves the turbo, comes through the cooling system here, back through these pipes to the carburetor, down into the internal compressor to the cylinders. This is the guts of the system. Let's take a look at the real thing over here. This is a cutaway of the turbo. Now up here is where all of the compression takes place. The exhaust gases come in here and spin this bucket wheel. The bucket wheel is on the same shaft as the impeller, and it's this impeller that actually compresses the air. The faster the bucket wheel turns, the faster the impeller rotates, and the more air is compressed and sent to the engine. Here, just off the exhaust manifold, are waste gates. When these gates are wide open, the exhaust gas is dumped out into the air instead of being directed back to the turbo. But the higher you take your airplane, the more these gates will close, which means the exhaust gas goes back in an increasing amount and puts the turbo to work compressing air for the engine. This action is controlled by a supercharger regulator. You guys will learn a lot about controlling your turbo when you're ready for altitude work. The throttle and turbo on the quadrant are normally linked together, but in transitional training you won't be using the turbo. Later on, if you want to get off the ground fast with full military power, you'll set the throttle and turbo control handle all the way forward, getting 52 inches manifold pressure and 2,700 RPM. Using maximum power for more than 5 minutes isn't a very smart idea, unless you happen to get a hiney on your tail. When you throw this switch on top of the throttle and push both throttle and turbo full forward past the throttle stop, you'll get war emergency power through the water injection on the P-47 D5s and subsequent models. When you're using water injection, water is mixed with gas and you'll really go places. Water injection is available for only 11 minutes continuous use, and you've got to use it sparingly, just like your ammunition. It sounds screwy, but brother, when you need that extra power, water injection will give it to you. Now let me caution you about something. When you're using the turbo and throttle interconnected, they should be retarded slowly. When you're using them individually, always retard the turbo first and then the throttle, making sure the turbo is never left ahead of the throttle. Your landing gear and flaps are operated hydraulically. I'll show you the controls when we get in the cockpit. As for armor, you've got steel plate in front of you about here, bullet-resisting glass, and your engine also gives you protection from the front. In back of you, you've got steel plate about here, and your fuel tanks give you secondary protection from underneath. As for firepower, you've got 8 50 caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing, with a maximum loading of 3,400 rounds. There's a trigger on the stick that fires all your guns at once. And let me tell you, they pour out plenty of hot steel.
How are the guns charged, sir?
Manually, on the ground. Well, I think I've told you about everything you need to know. Outside of the fact the little man said there are 105,895 rivets in this airplane. And enough aluminum to build the biggest kitchen sink in the world. Any questions? Okay, Lieutenant, suppose you come out on the line and we'll check through the cockpit. And the rest of you might be looking through the poop sheets. And get some time in that Republic cockpit training. These flaps are left down to keep them from getting walked on. Now, nearly everything in here is familiar to you, but let's look at this cockpit clockwise and see what you've got in the 47 that may be new to you. Now, down here on your left is your fuel selector. You take off on main. On the trim box, you've got your elevator crank here. Now, this knob nearest the rudder is for the rudder, and the one toward the front is the aileron tab control. Also, down on your left, you've got this emergency hydraulic hand pump for use if the engine-driven pump fails. And here, your gun heat control. For your flaps. Forward, and the flaps are up. You pull back to lower them. You can stop your flaps in any position by putting the control in neutral. Well, now then, for your landing gear, to raise the gear, you flip this safety lock, press this button, and raise the handle. And be sure to let it go all the way up. To lower the gear, push the handle all the way down.
Sure is a wide landing gear.
You betcha. And that's a big plus for pilots. Well, now then, up here are your indicators for oil and intercooler shutter. Open for takeoff, neutral for landing. They're electrically operated from the switch panel. Well, now, going on clockwise, this is the gun and camera switch. And make sure it's off when you're landing. Turbo, throttle, prop, mixture. When you're starting the engine, you'll keep the mixture control in idle cutoff until the engine is firing. On your switch panel, there's your generator switch, propeller switch, and the rheostat that determines the speed of the booster pumps for your fuel supply. This, of course, stays in starting, except in emergency if the engine-driven pump fails. Here's the landing gear warning light. It's a very important little item. When you push the throttle forward on takeoff, the warning light will come on and will remain on until the wheels have been retracted and they're definitely up and locked, at which time the light will go off. It will remain off until your throttle is almost fully retarded, as in coming in for a landing. The light will then come on and stay on until you have lowered your landing gear and it's fully down and locked. You've got standard instruments on your panel. Flight instruments are in the middle. Your engine operating dials are on the right. Notice that the speed limit on this airplane is redlined at 500. Here's your fuel level warning light. Remember that when it comes on, you've got a maximum of 20 minutes left to find a place to sit this baby down. And this is the light for your turbo, which you don't have to worry about for a while, but which works like this. At turbo speeds around 1500 RPM, this light flickers. That tells you the light is in working order. Then it goes off until your turbo reaches about 18,000 RPM. And then it starts to flicker again. When your turbo gets up to 18,250 RPM, the light comes on steady and stays on steady until you reduce turbo speed below critical. The idea in high-altitude flight is to fly with this light flickering. Of course, you won't have to pay any attention to that until you get into altitude work. Now, the instruments on your panel are pretty much standard. Your criticals are shown in red, and you're okay so long as you're in the green. You've got your checklist, against which you can double-check your limits. Here is your parking brake. And here are your oxygen controls. Before you start going on altitude missions, the oxygen officer will give you the details on your oxygen equipment. You'll want to know how to check your oxygen equipment carefully, especially for leaks. You've got a blinker to show when you're receiving oxygen with this demand-type system. Here's a supply warning light, and there's your supply gauge. When the time comes, you'll get all the facts, so you'll always know how to use your equipment. Over here is your cowl flap control. Open for starting. You've got some radio equipment over here. It's simple enough, but you'll get the details from your radio officer. Here's your tail wheel lock. With the handle back, the tail wheel is unlocked for taxiing, pushed all the way forward, and is locked for takeoff and landing. That's your flap equalizer. To check for equal pressure, notice this rod. It should stick out 3/8 of an inch. You can make this check only when the engine is running. Now then, your canopy will slide forward when you press that release latch. Go ahead, try it. When you get it closed, take your finger and feel right under here for this nubbin. If you can feel it, she's locked all right. Right. If you want to get the canopy, you pull that ring and press the canopy release at the same time. And wind pressure forces the canopy back. Now then, if your canopy ever gets jammed on the ground, you've got these levers on each side. When you push them up, the glass panels fall out.
Well, that looks like about everything. Except there sure is a lot of stuff in that switch panel.
Oh, don't let that bother you. These are all circuit breakers down here. Pop-out fuses. These are your light switches. They're all labeled and you can study them. This is the ammeter. And here's the gun sight light rheostat. Well, what you've got to do now is give yourself plenty of drill in this cockpit. You want to know the importance of every instrument and exactly how and why to use each one of them. So remember, when you've got this 47 up in the air, it's too late to start thinking about what you're going to do. Play around with a cockpit trainer in the pilot's room. It isn't meant to be a substitute for the real thing. It's a training device that'll help you learn the cockpit in your spare time, if any. You're going to know this cockpit blindfolded before you fly the airplane, and time and drilling yourself is the only way you're going to really know it.
Golfers is the craziest people. But from golfers, you pilots can get a serious lesson. If I ain't too personal, take this, for instance. The first rule is keep your eye on the ball. How many of you is looking at the ball? You said it. Me neither. But in golf, there are certain things you gotta do the same way every time. First, you gotta get the ship trimmed for a zoom down the runway. Cowl flaps open, landing gear resting firmly on the ground. The stick is eased well back until a stall occurs. Now full throttle. And the maneuver is completed with a normal loop. For you newcomers' information, maneuver is not what you put on your victory garden to make your vegetables grow. Then comes the approach. The one that works best for me is, hiya, Toots. No, pardon me. That's a different game. I mean, to reach your objective successfully, and I know you alert pilots in the audience is now ready for tomorrow, you gotta follow an established procedure. Make the right way the only way. An established procedure is what a good golfer does as his second nature.
What the professor was trying to say is that in flying the P-47, there's an established procedure to follow from the moment you approach the airplane until you turn it over to the crew chief at the end of the flight. It's a procedure which you'll learn so well that it'll become part of your second nature, simple and natural, a habit.
Well, how's your ticking, Joe?
There it goes, sir.
That's good. The lieutenant's taking his first hop in the 47 today.
Good.
You're getting ready to go up in the 47. And as a part of your regular procedure, you make an exterior check of the airplane, reporting anything that doesn't look just right to your crew chief, who's your team partner.
It's running swell. All right with me.
All right, Lieutenant. Clockwise check. Gas selector on main. Trim tabs in takeoff position. Flaps up. Landing gear down and locked. Oil and intercooler shutters checked for open. Turbo closed. Crack your throttle 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. Prop lever pull forward. Mixture control and idle cutoff. Generator switch on. Prop control switch in automatic. Mags off. Battery off. Cage your flight instruments. Cowl flaps open. Radio off. Tail wheel unlocked. When you've made your clockwise check, you've covered your checklist. But you want to look at your list whenever you're in doubt. Also to check your limits.
Clear? Where?
Mags on both. Battery on. All right, primer. 2 strokes is enough in this heat. About 15 seconds on your energizer. Hold it till she whines.
Clear? Clear.
Engage.
Radio on. Idle around 900. Anywhere between 800 and 1,000. Check your oil pressure and temperature.
Army 8283 to Pine Castle Tower. Standing by Hangar 3 for taxiing instructions. Over.
Pine Castle Tower to Army 8283. Okay to taxi. South on number 4. Over.
Remember, you're going up between 8 and 10,000. Steep and shallow turns, power on stalls and power off. Pull your flaps up and watch how you settle. We're going up to see how this airplane reacts. Well, let's make this a good one, Lieutenant.
Here you go for number 1. You're S-ing all the time you're on the ground. Keep your head up so you can see what's going on around you. You'll come to know that the position of your wheels is just under your inboard guns. Good thing to know if you're ever running close to the edge. You're taking it easy on the brakes. You're playing with them, not tramping on them. With mags and flap equalizer checked, we're ready to call the tower.
Army 8283 to Pine Castle Tower. Ready for takeoff. Over.
Pine Castle Tower to Army 8283. Okay to take off on number 4. Over.
Like a kid crossing the street, you look up and down that runway. Tail wheel forward to lock. Clear your engine. Here we go for a good one. Throttle forward with a steady positive motion. You're flying your 47 down the runway. You're not taking for granted that you're going to stay in the groove just because the tail wheel's locked. Keep to the center. Let's go back and see your takeoff again. You're helping the airplane just a little bit. Feel your way to airborne. Now you're getting your wheels up. You're making a good takeoff. Let's see it over again. This pilot is going to be telling the boys about this experience. 47's wide landing gear gives this ship excellent ground looping characteristics that can be your friend in need if your engine should ever fail on the takeoff. Before this pilot looped, he slowed her down as much as possible and unlocked the tail wheel. He gave hard left rudder and left brake to pivot. As for you, you're out of the pattern now and established in your flight. Now you're leveling off at the altitude you want and setting your throttle and RPM for your desired cruising speed, which at this stage of your training will be about 32 inches manifold pressure and 2,250 RPM. Switch from main to auxiliary. You want to keep those instruments in the green. Check your checklist on your operating limits. Trim your plane. Trim tabs on the 47 are sensitive. You can trim your ship quickly and easily with a small adjustment. We're on a definite schedule on this flight, so let's get in those shallow and steep banks and get the feel of the 47. Some low and high-speed turns, and check on your turning radius. In practicing your stalls, notice the amount of altitude you need for recovery. You won't be in any doubt about when the P-47 is going to stall. It'll let you know. Buffeting and sloppiness of controls are your stall signals. This airplane will drop straight. It has no tendency to spin. Nose down to pick up speed. Let's have another one with wheels and flaps down. Up with the nose slowly. There she goes. Better check the stalling speed on your own individual airplane. Time to head for the barn. With your shoulder harness locked, you're making a clockwise check of the cockpit before landing. Gas selector turned to your tank containing the most fuel. Aileron and rudder and landing trim. Oil shutters and intercooler shutters in neutral. Propeller RPM at 2,550. Mixture control at auto rich.
Army 8283 to Pine Castle Tower. Standing by for landing instructions. Over.
Pine Castle Tower to Army 8283. Okay for landing. You're number 1 on number 4. Wheels down and locked. Over.
Wheels down and up. Roger.
Canopy open. Cowl flaps closed. Check your flap equalizer. You want the rod to stick out 3/8 of an inch. At 1,000 feet, you're coming in on the base leg. At the turn, you're 600 to 800 feet. 150 indicated airspeed. Coming out of the turn, you're at 500 feet. Flaps full down. You set your 47 down on the first quarter of the runway. Here's how you look while you're doing it. Flaps coming down. Back on the throttle. You're establishing your glide, about 120. You're lined up with the runway. You're coming in for a normal 3-point landing. Smooth as silk. In the P-47, you don't lower your landing gear with your speed above 200. If your landing gear should fail to come down, get out of local traffic and find out what's wrong. To lower a stubborn landing gear, yaw the airplane. This should bring you in with wheels pulled down and locked. When you're making your turn for a landing, your speed is 150. Coming out, about 140. Never lower your flaps if your speed is above 190. If the flaps don't come down and there's no pressure indicated on the gauge, put the flap handle down and operate the hand pump. Be sure the landing gear handle is in neutral when you operate the pump. This pilot has come in too high and hot. If you should ever find yourself in this position with too much speed or height to land in the first quarter of the runway, pour on the coal and boot it out of there. Give it full power, but don't pull up too steeply. When you're above 500 feet, milk your flaps up. When you get some altitude, go around and shoot another landing. You're making this a good one, but remember that a landing hasn't been completed until you stop rolling. You're not riding your brakes. A little brake. Let them cool off. A little more brake. You're getting down to taxiing speed before you unlock your tail wheel. Get it unlocked before you start to turn. You're S-turning constantly to keep from chewing up somebody's tail. Cowl flaps open. Wing flaps retracted so they don't get nicked by flying stones. When you come into line, you want to leave your airplane the way you'd like to find it for an emergency takeoff. Parking brakes set until the chocks are under the wheels. Radio off. Clear the engine, 1,000 RPM, and then mixture control to idle cutoff. When the propeller stops rotating, cut the mags. Battery off. Fuel selector off. Rudder and aileron trim tabs to neutral. Flaps down. Generator switch off. Flight controls locked. You made it a good one, all right. You knew what you were doing all the time, and you didn't take anything for granted. You took all the necessary safety precautions for ground personnel, yourself, and the airplane. You kept your head up out of the cockpit, on the ground and in the air. You S-ed the airplane all the time on the ground. You used the throttle smoothly on takeoff. You got off the ground nicely. Felt pretty good, too. You glanced frequently at your instruments to see that temperatures remained in the green. You used your time in the air to feel out the P-47, to discover stalling speeds and turning radius. When you came in, you made a proper turn and approach. That's a nice job of flying. The kind of flying that helps any pilot through transition and into combat.
Jimmy, why don't you run upstairs and play?
Yeah, I will. Only I want Dad to see my pictures first. Here's the B-17. That's a B-24. And here's the P-38. And here's the P-47. Now see if I'm right, Jack. Wingspan, 41 feet. Pratt Whitney 2,000 horsepower engine. A four-bladed 12-foot 2-inch propeller. I mean prop.
I don't see any propeller.
Of course you don't. It's turning over 2,700 RPM.
Oh, I see. And what's this?
That's a turbo supercharger. It's one I designed myself. It's a lot better than the one in the P-47. The air in my turbo comes through this duct.
Jimmy, why don't you duck?
Not duck, duct. Science talk. Anyway, you gotta have a turbo supercharger to take a P-47 upstairs. Don't you know anything about airplanes?
Jimmy knows his airplane. He's not kidding when he says that the high-altitude performance of the P-47 depends on that turbo packing air into the carburetor. The turbo does for the 47 what the pilot's oxygen system does for the pilot. Keeps the ship flying high at fighting efficiency. The turbo in your 47 is simple in operation, much simpler than Jimmy's. The actual compressing of air is done back here in the rotor. Exhaust gases turn the bucket wheel, which drives the impeller of the compressor. The waste gates in the exhaust system control the speed of the rotor by opening and closing, and thus directing more or less gas against the bucket wheel. The waste gates are operated by a regulator. The regulator, in turn, is controlled by the pilot when he changes the control setting on the quadrant. When you establish a control setting, the regulator will automatically operate the waste gates to maintain manifold pressure. As you increase altitude and decreased atmospheric pressure causes engine power to drop off, the waste gates gradually close. More exhaust gas is directed against the bucket wheel to make it rotate faster and compress more air. Now another indicator becomes important, the turbo overspeed warning light. When your P-47 nears its critical altitude, the rotor will reach about 18,000 RPM, and this light will blink. When the light stays on steadily, you have reached the maximum allowable speed of the turbo under normal conditions, 18,250 RPM. Anything that moves has a speed or stress limit, and that goes for the wheel and impeller of the turbo. They're not designed to hold up long at speeds over 18,250 RPM. The blinking light is a warning. The steady light means you've reached the critical speed of the turbo. Above critical altitude, you reduce manifold pressure to keep the warning light blinking while you continue to climb. Now, let's watch the controls in relation to a climb. The turbo light begins to flicker. Turbo speed is increasing. When turbo speed reaches 18,250 RPM, the light comes on steady. The pilot reduces power to the point at which the light flickers. He keeps reducing power as may be necessary to keep the light flickering throughout his climb. That's all he has to remember. Keep that light blinking. In P-47 D5s and subsequent models, the water injection system gives war emergency power for limited periods, increasing horsepower and rate of climb beyond military power limits. With water injection, you'll build up approximately 56 inches of manifold pressure and develop 2,300 horsepower. Water injection will increase your speed about 20 miles an hour. Say water injection for emergencies. Think of it just the way you do your guns. When you start aerobatics in the P-47, these same maneuvers. The P-47 is a bigger, faster, and heavier ship, but you put a 47 through its paces just about as you did your AT-6. There are exceptions, of course, and they're important. In the 47, you avoid inverted flight, except for the few seconds necessary to perform a given maneuver, since inverted flight starves the engine for oil. Snap rolls are not permitted. And in practicing dives, you pay particular attention to speed and altitude. The P-47 can reach a speed of 500 miles per hour indicated from an altitude of 10,000 feet or below. That's to remind you pilots with strong left arms that in the 47 you can lose about 10,000 feet in attaining 500 miles an hour indicated. Better go up higher, around 20,000 feet or above, if you're going to keep, say, a 10,000 foot margin between you and terra firma. At higher altitudes, where the air is thinner, dives should be held to lower indicated air speeds. As the dive chart on your instrument panel will tell you, a safe diving speed at 30 to 35,000 feet is 250 indicated airspeed. At 25 to 30,000, it's 300 indicated. At 20 to 25,000, it's 350. At 15 to 20,000, it's 400. At 10 to 15,000, it's 450. And at sea level to 10,000 feet, it's 500, which you'll remember is not recommended for a steep dive in training. These are speeds at which you'll find handling characteristics of the P-47 to be normal. The P-47 can be pushed into speeds of compressibility where a breakdown of airflow occurs. And under such conditions, you may experience a temporary loss of control until you've dropped to denser air. When you dive the P-47, your cowl flaps should be closed. Oil and intercooler shutters at neutral. Your plane is trimmed for level flight. When you come back on the throttle, you'll do it gradually, bringing the throttle back just enough to keep from overboosting the engine. In your first dives, take it easy. Get on to this airplane's diving characteristic. You do the loop in the 47 just the way you did in your training plane. In the slow roll, as in all your aerobatics, give yourself plenty of altitude. Put the nose on a point and keep her rolling. The Immelman. A good one takes plenty of power and speed. To spin the 47, stall it, and then kick it into the spin as you would any other airplane. To recover, you will apply full opposite rudder, neutralize elevators, pull ailerons against the spin, and use power to speed recovery. One turn is all that's recommended. One practice spin is all you need in your training. In the half roll or split S, you'll pick up speed fast when you start your dive. Always do this maneuver with plenty of altitude and always with power off, spelled O-double-F. For skeptical pilots, we draw a diagram. Here is There's an airplane to fight in. With all its speed and performance, with all its fighting punch, the Thunderbolt handles the way you like them. Smooth, quick, sure. The aerobatics you do in the P-47 are a prelude to combat. When you're flying the Thunderbolt, you've got an airplane strapped to your pants that's designed to chase the enemy out of the sky. It takes two to do the job, the airplane and the pilot. To pilots of the P-47, good hunting.